We speak of love. We praise commitment. We idealize monogamy, as if it were the most natural expression of affection. But behind every vow, every promise of forever, there is a silent question echoing in the dark. Is monogamy a choice or a cage? Do we remain faithful because we deeply love, or because we've been conditioned to equate loyalty with virtue? Is it devotion or domestication? For centuries, we've been told that true love means exclusivity, that fidelity is not only moral but sacred, that the highest form of love is the one that limits all others. But what if that's not true? What if monogamy isn't natural, but constructed? What if its beauty lies not in its ease, but in its defiance of nature? This episode is not for those seeking comfort. It is for those willing to look into the flame, to question the contracts they signed with their hearts. Because today, we enter a battlefield that lies beneath nearly every relationship. The war between instinct and ideal, between desire and discipline, between what we feel and what we're told we should feel. Schopenhauer, the ruthless pessimist, believed love was a biological trick, that monogamy was not sacred, but delusional, a fiction we use to suppress our true nature. Alain de Botton, the modern romantic realist, disagrees. He sees monogamy not as a prison, but as a project, one built not on fantasy but on humility and growth. According to Alain de Botton, for love to be meaningful, it would have to go against our nature. To be faithful to one person, de Botton argues, is not to deny desire, it is to redefine it. And even if it is desirable to be with different people, love is choosing the same person every day. Schopenhauer and Alain de Botton will collide. And between them stands every person who has ever asked, why do I want someone else, even when I'm in love? Why does loyalty sometimes feel like suffocation? Why does freedom feel like betrayal? Before we begin, ask yourself, is loyalty proof of love or fear of chaos? And if you've ever questioned the rules of love, even in secret, you are not alone. This is the thinking war. We call it natural. We call it noble. We tell ourselves that monogamy is the default state of love, that one person is enough forever. But is that the truth? Or is it a comforting story we've chosen to believe? The truth is more uncomfortable. Across history, biology, and psychology, monogamy stands not as a universal truth, but as a cultural invention, one that demands more from us than instinct ever intended to give. In evolutionary terms, human beings were never wired for permanent exclusivity. We were wired for survival, for genetic variety, for attraction to the new. And yet, we live in a world where monogamy is not just expected, it is idealized. So we must ask, is monogamy a biological design or a societal discipline? And more urgently, what happens when a value that isn't natural is treated as mandatory? We see the cracks everywhere. Secret affairs in long marriages. Emotional dissatisfaction in exclusive partnerships. The quiet panic people feel when they meet someone new, while already committed. This isn't about right or wrong. It's about asking the question we've been trained to avoid. What if monogamy doesn't work? Not because we're bad at it, but because it was never built for us to succeed. This episode doesn't aim to destroy monogamy. It aims to understand it, because until we see monogamy clearly, not as a moral badge, but as a conscious practice, we will keep failing at it, not for lack of love, but for lack of clarity. If there's one philosopher who refused to romanticize love, it was Schopenhauer. To him, what we call love is nothing more than biology in disguise, a survival mechanism dressed up in poetry, a trick of nature to keep us reproducing, not connecting. And monogamy? A myth, a leash, a lie, asterisk asterisk. Schopenhauer argued that fidelity is not noble, it is unnatural. Not because humans are immoral, but because nature never designed us for exclusivity. In his view, romantic love is a chemically induced illusion, triggered to ensure reproduction. Once that goal is fulfilled, or once it becomes unreachable, the illusion collapses. He would say, you were not meant to love one. You were meant to chase many, for the sake of the species. To ask a human, male or female, to feel fulfilled by one person forever, is to deny the very instincts that shaped us. But the real cruelty, Schopenhauer said, is not that we cheat, it's that we expect we won't. We build entire lives on a promise that biology never agreed to. He saw monogamy not as a virtue, but as a prison sentence. A structure imposed by religion, morality, and fear, not by truth. And the damage? It's everywhere. Relationships dying in silence because attraction shifted. Marriages surviving on duty, not desire. People punished for what their instincts whispered all along. He didn't encourage betrayal, but he warned against self-betrayal, the kind that comes from pretending our nature isn't pulling in another direction. If Schopenhauer sees love as a biological trap, Alain de Botton sees it as a conscious rebellion. He doesn't deny the chaos of desire. He doesn't pretend that we are naturally monogamous. In fact, he agrees we are not. But for him, that is precisely the point. Love, to be meaningful, must go against our nature. Because nature is not kind. Nature wants reproduction, not respect. It wants novelty, not nuance. De Botton argues that the beauty of monogamy doesn't come from ease, it comes from effort. It's not a natural instinct. It's a spiritual discipline. To remain faithful to one person is not to deny desire, but to redefine it. He says, you will still be attracted to others. You will still feel the pull. But love is choosing someone every day, despite that. Loyalty is not a prohibition for him, but an orientation. Not a repression, but a form of growth. Because true love begins not with the death of desire, but with its redirection. In a culture obsessed with spontaneity, de Botton asks us to embrace ritual, to see love not as a feeling, but as a practice, one that includes boredom, conflict, repetition, forgiveness. He sees modern relationships fail, not because we stopped loving, but because we were never taught how to work at love. In his eyes, the most romantic gesture is not the spontaneous kiss or the grand declaration. It's the quiet, persistent decision to stay, day after day, temptation after temptation, not because there are no other options, but because you've seen them all and still chose this. On one side, a philosopher who sees love as an evolutionary illusion. On the other, a modern thinker who believes love is a practice, not a feeling. Between them, the battlefield of monogamy. Schopenhauer sees fidelity as a fiction, a self-imposed prison built to silence instincts too powerful to tame. To him, monogamy is a denial of biology, of truth, of the wildness that pulses beneath our polite smiles. He would say, you stay loyal not because you love, but because you're afraid of what freedom might reveal. Freedom, in his world, is desire unchained, and monogamy is fear dressed up as commitment. But Alain de Botton sees it differently. To him, the very fact that monogamy is unnatural is what makes it valuable. It isn't easy. It isn't automatic. And that's the point. He would say, you are not faithful because it's natural. You are faithful because it's meaningful. Monogamy isn't the absence of temptation. It's the daily, conscious act of choosing love over impulse. So who do we believe? Schopenhauer, who says we're wired to wander, or de Botton, who says we're capable of evolving? Is fidelity a form of repression, or is it the highest form of devotion? One sees the heart as a puppet of the species. The other sees it as an instrument of spiritual growth. And both, in their own way, are right. Because sometimes what looks like loyalty is actually fear, and sometimes what feels like suppression is actually commitment in its most courageous form. Where do you stand? Open your phone. Look at the conversations. Messages half finished. Matches waiting. Fantasies entertained but never admitted. We live in a world that demands loyalty and tempts us constantly to betray it. Monogamy hasn't disappeared. It's simply shifted. Today we don't ask, are you faithful? We ask, what counts as cheating? We ask, are emotional affairs worse than physical ones? We ask, can you love someone and still desire others? Welcome to the age of ambiguity, where faithfulness is negotiated, not assumed. Open relationships, polyamory, situationships, secret second accounts. Monogamy is no longer the default. It's a debate. And in this chaos, new rules emerge. You can flirt, just don't touch. You can think about others, just don't act. You can want more, just don't say it out loud. But who are we protecting with these rules? Our partners? Or ourselves? We shame those who cheat, but we ignore the systems that make loyalty almost impossible. We talk about self-control, but live in an economy of constant stimulation. Desire has become currency. Attention is more addictive than affection. And the line between fantasy and betrayal grows thinner by the hour. So we have to ask, is it realistic to expect one person to fulfill all our needs forever? Or are we just afraid to admit that our definitions of love and loyalty are outdated? Modern monogamy isn't dead, but it is confused. And perhaps that's not a failure. Perhaps it's an invitation to redefine fidelity not as perfection, but as conscious presence. To move away from punishment and toward understanding. To stop pretending desire disappears in commitment, and start asking how to navigate it with integrity. What do you think? Is modern monogamy evolving or collapsing? We began with a question, is monogamy natural or a prison? And now we ask a deeper one, do we truly seek freedom or just more choices? Because freedom, real freedom, isn't the ability to touch every hand, it's the ability to choose one, and still feel powerful in the choosing. But in a world saturated with options, commitment feels like limitation, devotion feels like defeat, and loyalty becomes less about love and more about scarcity. So what do we want? Do we want depth or novelty? Do we want intimacy or stimulation? Do we want truth or dopamine? It's not a moral question. It's an existential one. Because at the center of every romantic decision is a confrontation with self. This is thinking war. And today, we don't decide what love should be. We decide what we are willing to become in the name of it.